All right, in this video, we're coming to page 6 of A Cartoonist's Guide to Luke, which is part 2.3, and it covers chapter 6, verses 1 through 16. We can see, again, Jesus is having conversations and conflicts with the Pharisees, religious leaders, and this is all about the Sabbath and what is the law and the purpose of the Sabbath, and then we'll see Jesus calling his disciples. So Jesus is walking through this grain field on the Sabbath day. And we have to remember that in the law of Moses, when God gave instructions to the children of Israel, after they had been released from slavery in Egypt, he gave them a law that's the third of the commandments of the 10 Commandments to observe the seventh day of the week, the Sabbath, a day of rest. And you're not supposed to work. And the reason you're not supposed to work is because in Exodus, it tells us that God rested on the seventh day after creating the universe. And if God deserves to rest one day a week, then people do too. And the importance of the Sabbath, we need to remember, is that the people had just been slaves for 400 years and had never gotten to rest because they weren't worthy of rest. They were just beasts of burden. And so the Sabbath is a liberation. It is a gift from God to encourage people to slow down, to take a day off, to rest, recuperate, because they'll be healthy if they do that. But as with many laws and religious systems, the Sabbath had become kind of an oppressive law because the Sabbath was one of the things that identified a Jew as separate from the Gentiles. And so when the Pharisees saw that Jesus' disciples were picking grain and eating it because they were hungry, this was technically a violation of the Sabbath law, and they called Jesus out on it. And so Jesus refers to a story from Samuel when David and his men were running from Saul. They were tired, they were weary, and on a Sabbath day, they came to the tabernacle, and there was the bread of presence, which is the sacred bread in the tabernacle. And the priest gave the bread to David and his men to eat. And it was not a violation because they were hungry. And so Jesus says, hey, if David could do it, so can I. Because the Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath. And so now Jesus is claiming himself the title, the Son of Man. And of course, the religious leaders didn't like that much. So then Luke gives us another story that takes place in a synagogue on the Sabbath. So the first one was out in a wheat field. Now we're inside of a synagogue on the Sabbath, which is where you gather for the Sabbath. And there was a man with a withered hand. And so Jesus asks the Pharisees, now he's testing them. He says, is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath? Well, they don't know how to answer him. And so he heals the man's hand. And again, they are so angry at him because Jesus is messing with them. He's showing them that they have distorted and flipped the priorities of the law of Moses. And the law of Moses has now become as oppressive to the people as being slaves in Egypt. And Jesus said the law of Moses was to set us free, not to become a burden to us. So you put all of these stories together and you have this Luke's commentary on Jesus and the Sabbath laws. Now we switch the story to yet again Luke pointing out that Jesus gets away from the crowd. He goes up on a mountain to talk to God. And in this case, the reason he does that is because he's about to make a huge decision. See, this demonstrates, just as we talked about in our last video, about how in chapter 5, verse 16, we highlighted that Jesus got away to deserted places to pray. This demonstrates the importance of solitude for prayer with God. In this case, the reason that he does that is because he is about to make a huge decision. And the decision that he makes is he appoints 12 men to be his apostles. Now, we know that Jesus had lots and lots of disciples following him all the time. The crowds were huge. And remember, a disciple simply means a learner. And so to be a disciple of Jesus is to be a student of Jesus, to follow the ways of Jesus. We are disciples today. But these 12 men he appointed to be his apostles. Now, the word apostle means one who has been sent. And so like an ambassador is an apostle. When a king would send people on his behalf, that was an apostle. And so these 12 apostles, they are named for us in the text. We have Judas, son of James, James, son of Alphaeus, Matthew, Philip, James, Andrew, Simon Peter, John, Bartholomew, Thomas, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot. It doesn't say explicitly in the text why Jesus chose 12 men, but I think one of the reasons is because there are 12 tribes of Israel. Jesus is reigniting the kingdom of Israel, like David, unifying the tribes and reconnecting and reminding people of the promise that God made to Abraham, that through his children, all nations would be blessed. And so these 12 apostles represent this reunification of the mission of God and the sending of the people of God into the world to proclaim the way of God and the way of Jesus in the world. One of the things that I love to just think about these 12 men is that they were ordinary men from different walks of life. We have fishermen, we have tax collectors, we have a trained assassin, a revolutionary. All of them had left their walks of life and to follow Jesus and to be part of Jesus' mission. And so common people just like you and me, and also not perfect people. And we know that one of the 12, Judas Iscariot, would eventually be the betrayer of Jesus in the final week. And so all kinds of great stuff that we can learn and think about as Jesus appoints the 12. And this sets him up for the next phase of his ministry in Galilee.